So these are just some of the tools that we've used, and we have others, and and these are things really that certainly I've worked at more over the last couple of years, and tried different things out with Hannah to see what works and what doesn't. But in doing so, I've kind of discovered things that actually I wish I'd done years ago, working with other athletes, and certainly we're working with younger athletes, but also things I will use going forward with some of my other athletes in the group. So one of the things we do with tactics, because for Hannah, the verbal and the communication side of things and the cognitive is a real challenge. So actually she won't, if we have a long conversation about tactics, and she's unlikely to remember much of that or take much of that in. She'll take certain bits of it in, but the sort of nuances of tactics, will just be lost. So actually what I've started to do with Hannah in the last few years of working with her is to do it with visuals, and which gives her time to take it away and cement things and in her head, and actually think about what might work for her. So that certainly seems to have helped. There are downsides of that, because obviously you can you still can only react on the day as an athlete, but actually these things are designed to give her choices when she's in the race, and so she can think about it and digest it and read it multiple times over. It really helps. I've also used this, the middle one is how I ranked my season. So having those conversations about how a race went can also be challenging sometimes, just because Hannah doesn't have the speech and the language to be able to articulate how a race went rather, beyond sort of good or bad, or I got a PB or whatever. So I use these cards where we get her to sort of position them in order of what she thinks is a good race, the bad, good race, a better race, a race that went well, a race that she could have improved on, a race that she could have done things differently. So I can be asking the questions, but she can be sort of moving the cards around to sort of position them as to how she would rank them in the season. This is what we had before we went to Tokyo, how she'd ranked the races she'd done so far that season in terms of how well she thought she'd run them, and not based purely on position or time. And actually her assessment of that was pretty much bang on as how I would have rated it. So we had a nice space at the top for Tokyo, and she managed to make that a 10 out of 10 in terms of her rating of herself. And then the simple things like warm-ups, she'll quite easily forget the order of things in her warm-up. So she would do a run, but then she might start doing some drills that you would normally put in a bit later in the warm-up. So I've taken to having these in infographic for her, so she keeps in a spike bag and she can kind of refer to and check on. And also it works really well when she's away on team trips as well. And next slide, please, Darren. And then just very quickly to give you, I'm conscious of time, but I'll give you a couple of, just give you an idea of what Hannah's week looked like. So you can see she's doing a lot of double daying. She's of an age where she's built up some miles through the road running background. She's always swum. She's very active in her life because she doesn't drive, so she cycles everywhere. She's on her feet with work. But actually, so she's actually very active in her days, which actually also is a challenge when she goes away on team trips, just getting that balance of rest, recovery between sessions, but also not being too sedentary. But that's what a typical week will look like for her at the moment. And as you can see, she just works just 3 days, so we not too much additional stress around that. And we mix it up with a little bit of watt bike and swimming as well, because she enjoys that, and it means she can get those extras in without a little bit of time off the legs as well. So that's a typical week in winter. And then next slide, please, Darren. And you see it's not massively changed when we go into the summer as well. I mean, reducing some of the running miles, and obviously becomes a little bit more specific, through the spring and the summer, in terms of the track focus. She's always doing S&C, but that's certainly over the last couple of years, we've used something called Team Builder, which I'll have a link at the end for you, but which is provided through British Athletics for Hannah as part of the World Plus Performance Programme. But it's certainly something I'm thinking of using going forward with the rest of my group, because actually it has fantastic resource in terms of video clips of S&C stuff, and we can keep it really simple for Hannah, but in sort of small 20-minute bite sizes that she can do often and regular. And for us, that means that she really cements some of those fundamentals that we've been trying to manage a little bit. Next slide, please, Darren. And then just to highlight some of the many things, which again, no different than other athletes, but we've had to sort of look at in terms of Tokyo. But I think the challenge for Hannah is ultimately it's all the information that comes with this, and the stress of change. And it's been an interesting one. Somebody who doesn't like change, likes routine, but to go to the other side of the world, to be away from your family longer than you've ever been away, with all that COVID throws at it. I mean, it's challenging for any athlete. So we did a lot of work around trying to prepare her for this, and it was a real balancing act of giving her the information that we felt she needed, but sort of shielding her from the information or the overload of information that perhaps she didn't need, and that would just kind of confuse her or frighten her even about, how much she was going to have to deal with. So, her well-being, was paramount, that she had enough to know about what to expect, that we could provide without overloading her with too much. And one of the ways we did that was, I did that was to sort of provide her a day-to-day planner really for while she was out there. She likes to be organised, so it works for her. She could fill it in, she could add things in, she could show it to the team staff and they could add things in as and when they came up when she was out there. But it also meant that we could manage some of the other things around her cooling strategies, her hydration, nutrition box blank there, but there might have been certain days when actually she'd had a long run or it was pre-competition day. There were specifics that we wanted her to do. And then a space for me to put little notes about things I know that she would normally ask me about training. And obviously the staff had the details of these as well. And then sort of, just managing those activity levels. So sometimes we might have that she goes for a walk in there because normally she'd be up and about. But it was a really interesting time because, obviously the heat out there was potentially, extreme. So she had hot baths to deal with from 15 minutes building up to 45 in the sort of 3 weeks before she went. She had time zones to deal with. So sort of going to bed earlier and getting up earlier in the week 10 days before. And a lot of work we did around her nutrition and hydration strategies as well. So really interesting time and a lot to take in for that athlete. Next slide, please, Darren. And then just very, very quickly, just to give you a flavour of what that looked like. She was a long time to be out in Tokyo away from home. So 17 days up to between travel and racing and a holding camp and into the village. So you can see, a really easy start, very, very easy running just to get used to the heat, and then just easing in with a couple of sessions, or a couple of strides even really, before that first session. And that first session, whilst it might look like a meaty session to some, for Hannah, that's a session she's well used to, and I know was a session that was comfortable for her. So it was a session that on fourth day in after travel, after several easy days, and she had some easy days leading in before travel as well. I knew that she would be okay with, and she coped very well with that. But all the time I was in contact with British Athletics and the staff out there who were absolutely brilliant, to looking after Hannah, but also feeding back on how she was doing those sessions and how we might adapt them and ease back a little bit. So, I've kind of tried to hit an awful lot in that hour, and I'm conscious of time. Hopefully there's some questions. I know I've jumped around a little bit, but I could probably make 3 presentations out of this, I reckon. But hopefully there's some useful stuff there. Hopefully give them a flavour of what we've done working with Hannah. Thanks, Darren. And some of the learnings we've had. But Darren's kindly just flagged up on more slides there, actually. But hopefully some of this stuff's really team builder link there, really useful. I would certainly have a look at that as a tool. I mean, there is a cost to it, but I think actually if you've got a large group of athletes who put in, I think certainly something worth looking at. I think one thing we found with lockdown is, possibly all athletes, again, competition potentially. Clearly that's why you performance group is what you train for, but equally it can be a distraction. And actually sometimes we've seen a lot of great performances of less competition in beginning of this season. So I think for us it's been really useful, and particularly with Hannah as well, who likes to kind of have to try and rein her back on the road running a little bit. But it's been really useful. I think it's demonstrated to some of my athletes the value of rest and recovery. I think having more time home and not being driving up and down motorways or whatever, I think they've been able to see what rest and recovery looks like properly at times. I think it's highlighted those intrinsic motivations of why people run. So those that really run because they love running, I think found it easy to get out and train than those that perhaps run only to win or only to get a time. And when there's no competition, much harder. Importance of well-being, obviously an obvious one. Did a virtual warm weather training camp, which is something I'll be doing again next year. And it was just setting talent challenges of things like anything from, cooking a Mediterranean meal and sharing it with the group to finding a different training location and getting a new stimulus, to devising their own session. So they had sort of 15 to 20 challenges that I set for the week around a whole variety of, the holistic approach to, training, and off they went, and they had to achieve those and get as many of them done as they possible. And they were great fun doing that, people posting what they did. So we'll certainly be doing that again to sort of spice things up in the middle of the winter, I think. And I think it also emphasised athlete communication for me around different athletes responded, kept in touch better than others in lockdown, and actually just highlighting that, again, athletes are different, aren't they? They need different kind of ways of communicating, staying in touch. And I think just how we read athletes and how we watch and how we observe what's happening. So, yeah, some takeaways from lockdown. Next slide, please, Darren. And then just to finish, I know it's been a whistle stop, really. It seemed like it was not that many slides when I started, and I was instructed not to have too many, but having done them, I'm conscious that this will be a few we could go back and talk more at some stage. But I just wanted to highlight a few things. I mean, obviously you've got the athletics links to British Athletics, but I wanted to highlight UK coaching as well. I'm on the advisory panel for UK coaching, and they do some, and I used to kind of tap into a lot of their resources years ago. And then I think for whatever reason, your head goes elsewhere in terms of looking at other things. But, certainly if you're not aware of them, I would certainly go and have a look, and some fabulous resources on there, particularly around some of those sort of softer skills, and the more generic stuff around coaching. A lot of really good evidence-based research stuff around that as well. And you don't have, there's content there that is membership-based, but there's content there that is free, and some really fabulous stuff in there as well. So do go and have a look at that. And then I'm more than happy for people to get in touch and have questions at a later stage to contact me on that email as well. So